Hey, everybody. I'm Jules Polonetsky. I'm CEO of the Future of Privacy Forum, a think tank working with privacy leaders and executives around the world on trusted data practices. And I'm really excited to be with you at RSA with two fabulous people, leaders, giants in the field of privacy, ethics, policy, legal issues, data protection. With me is Julie Brill, Corporate Vice President for Global Privacy and Regulatory Affairs at Microsoft. Julie plays an incredibly central role in helping shape Microsoft's practices on a range of policy issues and plays a leading role in industry, frankly, in working with stakeholders and advocates and academics and regulators around the world on trying to move the ball forward in this really frothy environment where companies are trying to use data, advance technology, deal with society's challenges while grappling with the regulatory and policy risks that we all are going to talk about today. I'm also so excited that Professor Danielle Citrin, now at the University of Virginia, is with me. Danielle has a long and storied career working on some of the most interesting and important privacy and data protection scholarship, and has been a mentor to a generation of us who've grown up, she's not that senior, but who've lived the last years really being shaped by her work. Julie was at the Federal Trade Commission before Microsoft, helped lead the privacy and security practice at the global law firm Hogan Lovells, worked at one point for the Attorney General of Vermont, and
North Carolina, just saying.
North Carolina.
And North Carolina, both Vermont and North
Carolina. There you go. All right, we got to make sure those states get their check boxes.
Right.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So let's jump in. It's been an incredible year, obviously, for everybody. And those of us who work at the intersection of data and technology obviously have been grappling with the incredible forces of change, the digital acceleration, but also the intense need for data to track COVID, for exposure notification, to deal with bias and diversity and machine learning. I think people living at the intersection of these issues have just seen an onslaught of issues, each more important than the other. So let's jump in. One of the big questions that a lot of us have been asked is, are we giving up privacy because of COVID? Because we need data. Clearly, saving lives, battling a pandemic is paramount. Question after question that I've been asked by interviewer or others, aren't we trading away our privacy? Is it worth it? So Julie, let me start with you. Did we give up privacy? We're doing online education, we're doing research with health data. Did COVID lead to a world where we gave up our privacy because we had to for the better good?
The pandemic has absolutely changed, I believe, forever, people's relationship with technology. We've learned that we can, or many of us can, work from home, be deeply productive, learn from home, and learn quite a bit, socialize online. That the connectivity that we have, the connections that we make to work, to people, to community, is bolstered by, and for a year has been completely supported by, connectivity and digital technology. So we've undergone a massive digital transformation. I mean, what would normally take years and years has been condensed to months and months. Enormous growth in digital platforms. We experienced that at Microsoft, and people experienced that elsewhere. And, I think that this heavy reliance on technology to sort of run our lives, work, school, social, family, has also, I think, raised consumers' expectations around how their data is going to be used and frankly, how it should be used. People are saying more and more that they're concerned about how their data is being used, and that they want more privacy. They want companies to do more, and they want governments to do more to ensure that their data is well protected. What we have right now in the United States in particular, but in other places around the globe as well, is individuals really are shouldering the burden of privacy, and they're feeling that. And they want, to engage, they want to be online, they want to interact, to work, to learn, and to be productive, and to be with their families. But they don't want to have to shoulder this burden all themselves. And frankly, the pandemic should not be the reason why people are being asked to give up their privacy. So it should be the case that companies that are providing these tools, schools that are using these tools, companies that are using the tools, and churches and temples and community groups need to be thinking about ensuring they're using trusted technology, need to ensure that parents know what their kids are doing. I mean, we need to lean in on these issues so people engage with controls that they have. But companies need to do more. Companies need to make sure that even if in the absence of a comprehensive law, which is still what we're experiencing in the United States, that they are providing the tools that people need so that they can trust these technologies. Because otherwise, trust in them will dissipate. We do know people will be working more from home. We will have a hybrid environment. People want to work from home, but they want to learn and work and socialize through trusted technology. So companies need to do more.
Danielle, from where you sit, you've recently written an influential paper of really helping try to define what harms actually are. Has this been a year of privacy harms with, I don't know, we're talking about vaccine passports. There's so many issues that seem to have been flapping up and creating concerns. Has this been a year of privacy concerns for you?
It's interesting that the thought that, we've always been under surveillance by companies in ways that we can't even fathom. But I think really important to underscore Julie's point that now there's salience, right? We can't feel data when we give it up, right? It doesn't ping, it doesn't sound. There are all these ways in which our information is being, the most intimate information about our lives is being collected, used, and shared, resold and resold again, right? In ways that we can't control, can't even comprehend, and couldn't, even if we're given the right to say, hey, don't use it, don't sell it, we just couldn't possibly contact the thousands of companies, right? And so I think that's right. It's given us a bird's eye view into the way in which our lives are surveilled. And so just then to return to the harms question, we have such a problem in the law with figuring out what the harm is. And in part, it's because the privacy torts just are not well suited to the problems of the 21st century. It's like it was made for an age where we had mass media publishing stories about people and advertisers taking someone's face and then taking it as its own. And you had sort of the one-to-many distribution. And now so many of our 21st century problems are about the collection, the use, and the sale of information, not giving it publicity to the world at large, right? But it's storage, it's collection. And so the privacy torts just literally provide us no help. And the difficulty with the harm problem is then plaintiffs do whatever they can. They're like, all right, I'll use 86 other torts to give it a whirl. But tort law and civil claims either haven't quite caught up, and courts insist upon financial, like really tangible harms that are financial and physical. And they haven't caught up with. So Dan Sullivan and I wrote this paper in which we go through a taxonomy of different privacy harms that aren't captured by sort of vested and visceral interests that we can feel and in the here and the now, and you can calculate them right now because it's, identity theft and what it precisely costs you. But it includes our thwarted expectations. It includes our autonomy harms. It includes our relationship harms and the not only breach of confidentiality, but also the trust. This is Julie's important point, the trust that we have in those relationships in the longer term. It's discrimination harm. So a lot of my work has been about the civil rights implications of online life. And my newest book is it's called The Privacy Myth, but it's about how we've turned our intimate lives into data and how we need to protect it. The implications for women and minorities are just different. right? When our information is collected, used, sorted, sold, and algorithmically scored. And so, we have a long way to go, right? We don't understand discrimination as a privacy harm, and we should. We don't understand thwarted expectations as a privacy harm, and we should, right? And so we have a long way to go, and sort of resting on control is almost impossible because vis-a-vis thousands of companies, I can't do it, right? And it is heartening, though. I have to say, as someone who writes in this field, seeing Julie, go from state AG's office to commissioner at the FTC, and now, basically running Microsoft's privacy. Like when Julie tweets, like, privacy is a human right, get your act together, folks. I'm like, man, this is a dream. Like if every company had Julie at the helm, right? I think self-regulation would mean something, right? And that was the ask in the late 90s, right? When, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, met with the state AGs, right? They said, trust us, we're going to take care of this data. They didn't realize they needed to monetize it, or they hadn't quite figured that out yet, right? And there was that bargain struck of self-regulation. And the deal with self-policing is there has to be self-policing, right? And if everyone's not Julie, I'm very worried about what that world looks like. So
is it fair for us to put, you listed,
I can end there, but
you listed such a range of issues, civil rights issues and, intimate harms. And we hear a lot about dark patterns, which are, deception that really is part of consumer protection law. And we know that automakers want data for, autonomous driving. And we know that healthcare researchers want data for health. Is privacy law, and we don't have a comprehensive privacy law in the US, and Julie and you and others are working, as are we, to try to get one, but is it reasonable to think that the issues of the world, right? Every problem in the world seems to be played out now with technology, with data. Isn't it quite a burden to somehow ask privacy law to solve all these problems of society? In Europe, perhaps the GDPR, where independent data regulators really get to decide, is the data needed for healthcare? No, that is too much. It's not necessary. It's not proportionate. And they need to be experts in this incredible range of domains because they're telling companies, no, that's too much telemetry. No, that's not enough. Do you see, Julie, you do business around the world on the Microsoft side. Are the Europeans handling this differently and better because they have a comprehensive law? Are the states, Virginia has just passed the law, California passed the law, Washington State is wrestling. The audience watching this at RSA is global. Are the issues too wide to be handled by privacy law? And are different regions of the world handling this differently? Are we all going to adopt some version of the GDPR? What's going to happen in the US? What do you say?
Great series of about 25 questions packed in there. I'd love to, address all of them. Listen, on some level, I think there is a hope that privacy law can address a number of issues. Danielle talked about some of them. As you point out, there are some privacy laws that focus on, use of data in discriminatory ways, in breach of civil rights laws. We've also know that GDPR, the European General Data Protection Regulation, talks about portability, which on some level is about privacy, but it's also actually about competition. So there are a lot of, I'll say, hopes and aspirations, if you will, for privacy laws. But I think there's a reason for that. I think because people's relationship to who they are and how they want to be portrayed has often been framed in the context of control, empowerment, and engagement. And at bottom, when you really think about it, that's what privacy laws are about. They're about choosing when you're going to engage and how you will engage, not having that defined for you unnecessarily, but having you have the ability to say no. I don't want my data used in that way, or I want to really understand what you're going to do with my data. So I think a lot of these other aspirations for privacy law actually sort of makes sense because of how fundamental privacy is. I often do say exactly what Danielle said. I say that privacy is a fundamental right, and I'm very proud that Microsoft believes that and actualizes it. But in some ways, it's also a foundational fundamental right. It's like without privacy, how do you do so many other things? How do you travel? How do you engage in speech? How do you exercise all these other rights? So bringing that to some of your other points, Jules, just really quickly, look, we definitely see that regulators and actually I should say parliaments and legislators around the globe are enacting more privacy laws. They're doing that because the Europeans are encouraging them to do that. There's a part of GDPR that basically says if you're like us, you will be able to send European citizens' data to your jurisdiction. Good for the Europeans for figuring out that that was a good way to sort of raise the bar, have everyone around the world have a race to the top. And you're seeing that race to the top around the globe. You are seeing, Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong enacting laws, and then you're also seeing and amending laws to make them even stronger. And to your point, Jules, we're seeing it in the United States. There's a lot of conversations in the United States about a comprehensive federal law. And those are very important conversations, Jules, as you point out. I'm very involved, you're involved, Danielle is involved. We're all thinking, what should that law look like? We needed it yesterday, but how do we make it happen as soon as possible tomorrow? But in the meantime, the states are acting. The laboratories of democracy are working at full steam. California has adopted not just one, but two. One through initiative, one through the legislature, and now Virginia has passed its law. And other states, I don't know, I think by last count, there's about 40 different privacy laws being discussed at various levels in the states. What this says to me is that there's a real need that people feel. It's the pandemic and COVID has accelerated this feeling, has sharpened this feeling, but it was something that existed before the pandemic. And these efforts are going to continue to sweep around the globe. As technology, as I said, has demonstrated how important it is in our lives, how central it is to staying connected, but also that raises the concerns about, am I really in control? And is this company really to be trusted? So I think we're going to see more laws around the world. I think many of them will be inspired by Europe. And we can maybe talk a little bit in a little while about sort of the distinctions between the US and Europe. But I think we will see more of this because I think it's just a fundamental human need that policymakers need to fulfill because people need it and people are asking for it.
Danielle, you were awarded one of the famous MacArthur Genius Awards. And I think what was being recognized, in addition to the work that you've done on privacy and data protection, is some of the work that you've done on intimate harms, on sharing of non-consensual photo or non-consensual sharing of photos, on some of the Section 230 issues, when can and should companies be liable to take things down that can be causing harm. There's, I think, some awareness that the pandemic year has been a challenging one for issues like domestic violence. People are cooped up, tensions are high, bad things happen. What's the year meant for you looking at these issues legally? Has this exacerbated some of these intimate harms that you've argued need broader legal protection than we have today?
Yeah, sadly so. I feel like I say this with my colleague, Marianne Franks, who we together, she's the president, I'm the vice president of the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative. Like, our work is a growth industry, sadly. Violations of intimate privacy are on the rise, and by quadruple fold. That is like in Australia, the complaints for any type of non-consensual taking, sharing, publicizing of intimate imagery is up by 250% in like the first 6 months of the pandemic. We've seen it at CCRI. All sextortion is tripling, its occurrence in South Africa, in France. So it's not just the United States. It's uniquely experiencing in Australia, uniquely experiencing a rise of the exploitation and weaponization of your intimate information. And so I feel like every day I got another email from someone, help, who do I go to? And I think one encouraging thing is that with CCRI, we've had law firms start to volunteer to work with us for pro bono counsel. And there's nothing better than when someone writes to you to be able to say, I think I have a lawyer for you. Because for years and years, we just pulling our hair out, doing our best to change the laws around the country, and to get law enforcement to enforce them, right? And so it's been a real struggle. And so often what victims want is for it to stop, right? Their lives are so upended. It feels so insecure and unsafe. And even searching yourself is like, it's a nightmare, because when will another, intimate photo show up, and where, on what site, and how do I figure out to take it down? And unfortunately, too many sites, that's their business. And so there are over 9,500 sites whose business model is intimate imagery, peeping toms, deepfake sex videos. It's depressing. And they won't take it down because why? It's like their clicks and shares and subscribers, right? For $19.99 a month, their subscribers are expecting a flow of non-consensual intimate images. And so I'm hoping that this helps lawmakers. I've been doing a bunch of work on the Hill to get them to see that we need some Section 230 reform. We shouldn't get rid of it, but we need to have the immunity conditioned on being a good Samaritan, and bad Samaritans certainly shouldn't enjoy it. But it's sadly true that the more we're in front of our computers, right, the more we are seeing, criminals, domestic abusers, take advantage of these tools in ways, so it's both strangers and people we know, people we trust, betray our trust. And it's just, it's been sort of devastating, I suppose, helpful in writing a book about it and why intimate privacy matters. Because as Julie says so well, it is a precondition for love. It's privacy is the precondition. It's the oxygen, right, for self-development and authentic identities. And dignity. And so, without that, who are we but shell of people, right? So, we've got some work to do, but I'm always super gratified that FPF has been so supportive of the work that we do at the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, and same with Microsoft, so that we have some, important champions behind the issue. But, it's going to take it's like, what do they say? It's a slow march with social and cultural forces, which are behind all this stuff.
And to be clear for the audience, right, the challenge is that companies don't want to be responsible for having to review every comment or every post in advance, right? That just doesn't scale. And
they won't respond to it also, Jules. Like, they don't give a sorry, bleep. And they're like, too bad, so sad. Actually, this is how we make our money, right? So it's not just the pre-screening cost, but it's the ex post cost at all they're not interested in, because that's how they make their money. And it's true, there's some companies who actually care, and at scale it's hard, right? So working with Twitter and Facebook, as I have for 12 years, they've been trying when it's in their self-interest, right? But at least they've been trying.
Well, it's clear Congress wants to turn up the pressure, not only in this area, but in the range of areas. The challenge just seems to be that the Democrats want companies to take down much more because of hate speech and election misinformation. And conservatives and Republicans think that they're being over moderated for having their views, and the companies are sort of in the middle, being yelled at by both sides. And whether or not reasonable compromises like some that you've advanced and others are feasible in this heated environment, I think is the challenge. Let me raise a different issue. The current White House and frankly governments around the world are focused on how to unlock data. The European Union has a big strategy. They'd like to catch up and compete. They want data available for AI. They want data collaboratives, data altruism. The Biden administration here in the US has said we want to unlock data to unleash innovation. We want data to train AI, but we also want to understand who did COVID impact? Did it impact one class of people, one ethnicity, one race? Which kids missed out? And that means we want data about some very sensitive things, your health, your students. how do we build fair machine learning models? How do we have the data so that we know whether or not we're discriminating? How do we have the data when it's really sensitive data? It's the highest risk data. It's race, it's sexual orientation. Are we also at sort of a catch-20? We want data more than ever. We understand discrimination is a big problem, but it's actually that data and opening it up that it is going to risk some of these problems. Julie, is federal legislation going to somehow solve this? How do we deal with the fact that we want data for equitable purposes, but we also are worried about the downsides?
One of the things that I think inhibited the US from having a really robust early response to the pandemic was the fact that we had lots of data, but companies didn't know how to use it. And especially companies outside of a HIPAA context, that governs health information when it's held by sort of traditional institutions, hospitals, insurance companies, and whatnot. But others, which have a lot of health and health-related data, felt that they weren't sure what the guardrails were. They weren't sure what lines they could cross or not cross. And as a result, we did not really know, like, where are the communities that are deeply impacted? How do we reach those individuals? How do we find out, who's needs help, maybe, wants to mask up or wants to stay home, but can't because of their economic situation or a different situation. We were really hamstrung. So I do think having a law that will make clear for companies what these guardrails are, when they can appropriately use data, when they need to de-identify, to aggregate, to really do what they can to take away personal identifiers, but still get meaningful information out of it. All of those kinds of guardrails, I think, would have helped us have a much more agile response to the crisis. You're raising another very important issue, though, that I think that we should talk about, which is, the fact is that what we saw over the past year is something that has been true in our society for a long time, but this is something that was deeply exacerbated. The pandemic laid bare that we need to address systemic racial inequalities that have been in our society for a very long time and have shaped our nation for way too long. Data is going to be critical, not just to solve health crises, but also to understand how is it that certain communities of color, communities of Black and African American, people, Asian Pacific Islanders, whatever, groups that we need to be focusing on, and there are many of them, how to understand how they are being impacted economically, socially, for religious reasons, et cetera. We need to be able to understand how this pandemic had a disparate impact on these communities. And that's going to take data. And so once again, if we don't have clear rules of the road where people say, okay, yeah, I'm going to use this data for good. And I want communities to understand that they're not going to be harmed all over again, right? The healthcare system has not necessarily done well. Many people in these communities have not necessarily done well by the healthcare system historically over the past decades. So these communities need to have confidence. People in these communities need to have confidence that when their data is being used, it's being used for good, and to help them come out of a pandemic, to help them escape poverty, to help understand how we can bring connectivity to their communities in ways that will allow them to learn and allow their kids to learn from home. There's just so many issues that we need to be focused on. Data is going to be critically important to driving solutions. We need, when we're thinking about a federal law, to say, if you're going to violate the civil rights laws, if you're going to engage in biased use of data, that is also going to be a problem with respect to this comprehensive privacy law. I believe, and Microsoft believes that, a federal privacy law ought to address civil rights. It ought to recognize that data can be discriminatory, so that we ensure that data can be used in a discriminatory way. And if data is going to be used in a discriminatory way, we need to ensure that companies understand that that's not okay. Those are the kinds of guardrails: how to robustly use data. What are the guardrails to make sure that you're not engaged in bias and discrimination, so that we can actually use data to help some of these communities that have been so deeply harmed for decades, but also especially over the past year.
Are you optimistic or worried when you hear me and others say, we need that sensitive data because we're gonna do good with it? We need it for research. We need it to find and root out discrimination. Are the civil society actors worried that this will lead to new abuses? If there's law in place, does that set the guardrails? How do you see sort of this call that's coming from, I think, a lot of stakeholders, right? And it's not just companies, right? And researchers who are saying, I need data, right? Advocates for the climate, right? Say, we need data, and what we need is more important than worrying about that little privacy risk because we're solving this big problem. There's some skepticism sometimes from civil society that the balance will work out well. What's your reaction?
So I think the important question always should be, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And, we often see AI or automated sort of programs used in ways that we're not trying to solve a problem, right? It seems like snake oil. There isn't really proof of concept, whether it's HireVue, uses, these sort of employment hiring programs, that claim to be able to use data to, make important suggestions that are free from bias. Absurd. There are all these ways in which I think the argument for data is a strong one, right? Particularly in the health context. There are ways in which we think, gosh, that trade-off is worth it, so long as Julie underscores, we have the guardrails, right? And protections. But there are other times in which we just have a data collection imperative. So we collect everything and then throw AI at it as if we're solving something important. And it's almost absurd. So I think we've got to figure out what the problems are, see if AI and different algorithmic systems can weigh in an effective way, have a proof of concept, and then set up the guardrails. But right now it seems like, every startup and their grandfather, and brother is like using AI for stupid reasons. And guess what? The risks are potent, and individuals will never know the jobs they don't get, the ads they do or don't see, the houses the apartments they're denied or never, right? So individuals can't remotely protect themselves from these sort of structural problems. So I'm with you if it's a good problem, Jules. That we have to solve.
Ads. So let's close with what has been perhaps the challenge of having serious data protection conversations for 20 some odd years since my early days at DoubleClick. We are worried about data because it might be used for behavioral advertising that could target me or make me feel like I'm being surveilled or do things that are discriminatory or give me only the low paid jobs. Concerns about and angst about the privacy and security of the current ad tech ecosystem have sort of been the behind the scenes scaredy legitimate issue, but it's been sometimes hard to have issues about, can we fix healthcare? Well, the data might be used and now there's change happening. Microsoft's Internet Explorer has been blocking third-party cookies for a while. Now Google is going to do it. Safari's been doing it. Apple is changing the way tracking can work on iOS devices. At the same time, ad tech provides revenue for lots of publishers. Advertisers compete. That's how they find customers. Are the platforms and the new laws that give people opt-outs of sale, are we radically changing the ad tech ecosystem, and is it going to be for the better? Julie, I'll let you both take that and we'll wrap up.
I think that we have the opportunity to invent our future. there are concerns about online behavioral advertising that looks at what people do as they are going from website to website and surfacing ads to them. Some people think it's creepy. Other people think that it's just inappropriate. You know, there are conversations in the United States about it, and there are conversations in Europe that are actually quite different. It's often, if you sit down with a privacy regulator in Europe, a data protection authority, they will say, like, why do we need it? What is this, the purpose of advertising? Why can't I just look at an ad that's random? And I think what's important is to understand that actually what advertising does, I'm not going to, not behavioral necessarily, but what advertising does is it allows companies, startups, mom and pop, whatever's, to find customers. And we want a thriving economy. We don't want just like the really big guys and gals who everybody knows to be the ones who succeed in our economy. We want small players to be able to compete. And so I think the key to this future of advertising is figuring out, how do we invent our future so that small, medium players can participate in an advertising ecosystem, so that journalism and publishers will thrive, because we've learned over the past several years how important journalism is to our democracy. These are the kinds of elements, all of which are part of an advertising ecosystem. Newspapers, that's how they make their money. Publishers, that's how they make their money. So I think that we have the opportunity to invent a respectful future for advertising, where we will have robust competition, thriving journalism, and people won't feel creeped out. They will be able to make choices. It's not impossible. We do have that future that we can invent, but we have to be committed and understand that there are a lot of different pieces that are part of this puzzle. And we want to try to create a system where everyone can thrive, not just the really big guys. And we want to make sure that journalism and small players are really doing well too.
Danielle, very brief final word to you.
So I think a measured, God, how could you disagree with Julie on this one here? A measured approach I think is important. And I don't want to see all the great things go away too, but I think, the fact that, we see churn that involves data brokers, there's a way in which I think limits need to be set. So I'm agreeing with Julie, and also echoing her insight about have there be guardrails.
Thanks to you both for a really great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. And it was wonderful to be here with both of you.
Same. It was wonderful.